Ambassador Zax Thor of the crystalline hegemony adjusted his translucent blue form in the council chamber's atmospheric field, watching the holographic displays flicker with incoming reports. As senior trade coordinator for the Galactic Council, he had witnessed many species rise and fall over his 3 centuries of service. But nothing had prepared him for the data streaming across his consciousness now. The chamber buzzed with nervous energy as representatives from 47 different species filled their designated zones. The air shimmered with various atmospheric requirements: methane clouds for the gaseous collective, high-pressure nitrogen for the stone speakers, and the standard oxygen-nitrogen mix that most carbon-based species preferred. The human communications networks have been silent for 72 standard hours, announced Director Veltar, her insectoid mandibles clicking with what Zax Thor recognized as anxiety. The Hive Queen's compound eyes shifted through the spectrum, displaying patterns of deep concern. All trade routes through human space have gone dark. Zax Thor felt a crystalline resonance of unease through his structure. Humanity had been a curiosity when they first achieved faster-than-light travel 50 years ago. A young species barely out of their home system, yet they had managed to develop jump drive technology in a fraction of the time it took most civilizations. The Council had welcomed them with the usual mixture of condescension and amusement reserved for newcomers. What followed defied all expectations. Within a decade, human merchants were operating in every sector of known space. Their ships, crude by galactic standards but surprisingly effective, began appearing at trade stations across the galaxy. They brought with them an inexplicable talent for logistics, negotiation, and adaptation that left even veteran traders struggling to keep pace. Perhaps they are experiencing some form of civil conflict, suggested Ambassador Korthak, his reptilian features displaying the bioluminescent patterns that indicated thoughtful consideration among his people. Young species often face internal strife as they expand beyond their home worlds. Zax Thor's internal processors hummed with disagreement. He had personally overseen trade agreements with 17 human colonies, and what he had observed was remarkable unity for such a diverse species. Unlike most galactic civilizations that achieved spaceflight through the dominance of a single subspecies or ideology, humanity had somehow managed to bring their entire planet along for the journey. I think we underestimate them at our own peril, Zax Thor transmitted, his thoughts echoing through the chamber's neural network. In 5 decades, they have established colonies in over 200 systems. They're merchant fleet rivals that of civilizations 10 times their age. Whatever has caused this silence, it is not mere internal discord. The massive view screen at the center of the chamber flickered to life, displaying a 3-dimensional map of known space. Human territories glowed in pale blue, scattered throughout the galaxy like seeds on fertile ground. Trade routes, represented by streaming lines of light, showed the flow of commerce between species. Where those lines passed through human space, they simply ended, as if hitting an invisible wall. Director Veltar's antenna twitched with agitation. Our economic projections show catastrophic disruption if human trade networks remain offline. They have become integral to 17% of all galactic commerce in less than 50 years. The number hung in the air like a challenge to everything the Council thought it knew about species development. Most civilizations required centuries to achieve even 5% market penetration in galactic trade. Humanity had accomplished more than triple that in a time frame that barely registered as a moment in galactic history. How is this possible? The question came from Representative Gorth of the Silicon Collective, his metallic form crackling with electromagnetic confusion. Our species has been trading for over a millennium, and we control only 12% of galactic commerce. Zax Thor had asked himself the same question countless times. He had studied human trade practices, analyzed their negotiation strategies, and observed their colonization patterns. What he found challenged fundamental assumptions about how civilizations developed. Humans were generalists in a galaxy of specialists. While most species evolved along narrow paths that maximize their abilities in specific environments, humans seem to maintain broad adaptability. They could negotiate with the logic-driven synthetic collectives as easily as they could with the emotion-based empathic union. Their merchants carried translation devices that went beyond language, somehow bridging cultural and conceptual gaps that had stymied galactic diplomacy for millennia. Send reconnaissance probes to the nearest human systems, ordered Director Veltar. I want to know what has happened to them. Already done, replied Navigation Coordinator Thex, his gaseous form pulsing with transmitted data. All probes sent into human space in the last 72 hours have failed to return. No debris, no distress signals, no trace of their destruction. They simply vanish at the border of human territory. A chill ran through ZYX Thor's crystalline matrix. In 3 centuries of galactic exploration, he had never heard of anything that could make ships disappear so completely. Pirates left wreckage. Natural phenomena left energy signatures. Wars left evidence. This was something else entirely. What about our trade stations in human space? Asked Ambassador Yyleth of the Flowering Realms, her plant-like form swaying with concern. Surely our own people can provide information. Thex's form darkened with troubling data. Communication with all stations in human territory ceased exactly 72 hours ago. No Mayday calls, no emergency protocols activated. The silence was instantaneous and complete. The implication struck ZYX Thor like a harmonic shock through his structure. Hundreds of alien traders, diplomats, and station personnel had gone silent simultaneously across dozens of star systems. The logistics required for such coordination was staggering. I request permission to address the Council. ZYX Thor transmitted, his form brightening with urgent bioluminescence. Director Veltar's compound eyes focused on him. Speak, Ambassador. ZYX Thor rose from his position, his crystalline body refracting the chamber's lights into dancing rainbows. Honored representatives, I believe we are making a fundamental error in our assessment of this situation. We continue to think of humanity as a young species, but perhaps we should consider that we have misunderstood what youth means in their case. Expun click Director Veltar. Every galactic civilization follows predictable patterns of development. First comes spaceflight, then slow expansion, then gradual integration into galactic society over centuries or millennia. Humanity compressed this timeline by an order of magnitude. We attributed this to luck, favorable circumstances, or simple determination. ZYX Thor paused, allowing his words to resonate through the neural network. But what if their rapid development was not fortune, but capability? What if we have been observing not a young species learning to walk among the stars, but a mature power choosing to appear young? Uncomfortable harmonics echoed through the chamber. The idea challenged everything the Council believed about species development and their own position in the galactic hierarchy. You suggest deception? Ambassador Korthak's scales shifted to patterns of skepticism. To what end? Not deception, ZYX Thor replied, his form pulsing with careful consideration. Observation. Think about their trade practices. They never competed directly with established markets. Instead, they found gaps we didn't know existed and filled them. They connected isolated systems, created new trade routes, and somehow made themselves indispensable without threatening anyone. The truth of his words resonated through the chamber's collective consciousness. Humanity had indeed integrated into galactic society with remarkable smoothness, avoiding the territorial conflicts and economic disruptions that typically mark the rise of new powers. Moreover, ZYX Thor continued, consider their colonies. Most species expand by establishing dominance over suitable worlds. Humans colonize everything. Ice worlds, desert planets, toxic atmospheres, even space stations and empty systems. They adapt themselves to the environment rather than adapting the environment to themselves. Your point. Director Veltar's mandibles clicked with impatience. My point is that we may have systematically underestimated human capabilities because they chose not to display them. A species that can adapt to any environment, establish profitable trade with any culture, and coordinate activities across hundreds of systems without apparent central authority is not a typical newcomer to galactic society. The chamber fell silent except for the ambient hum of life support systems. ZYX Thor could feel the collective processing of his words through the neural network, each species' representatives running calculations and reassessments based on this new perspective. If you are correct, Ambassador Yalitha's photosynthetic patterns flickered with concern. Then, what has caused them to reveal themselves now? And why through silence rather than action? Before ZYX Thor could respond, alarms began resonating through the chamber. Emergency protocols activated, bathing everything in the harsh red light that indicated imminent danger to galactic security. Report. Director Veltar's voice carried harmonics of command that compelled immediate response. Navigation Coordinator Thex's gaseous form swirled with incoming data. Long-range sensors are detecting massive energy readings from human space. Something is happening on a scale we've never observed before. The main view screen shifted to sensor display mode, showing energy patterns streaming from dozens of human systems simultaneously. The readings were off every known scale, representing power outputs that exceeded the total energy generation of most galactic civilizations. What kind of technology could generate such readings? Whispered Representative Gorth, his metallic form actually vibrating with electromagnetic interference from the distant energy sources. ZYX Thor studied the patterns, his crystalline matrix processing the data through centuries of accumulated knowledge. Nothing in galactic history matched what they were observing. The energy signatures were not consistent with any known weapon, propulsion system, or industrial process. Perhaps more importantly, he transmitted slowly. Why are they generating such energy simultaneously across their entire territory? This level of coordination implies communication and control systems we never detected. Director Veltar's compound eyes shifted to deep purple, indicating the highest levels of concern in her species. All trade and diplomatic missions to human space are hereby suspended pending further analysis. This session is classified under Galactic Security Protocol 7. Nothing discussed here leaves this chamber without Council authorization. As the representatives began filing out through their respective atmospheric locks, ZYX Thor remained in place, his internal processors working through implications that grew more disturbing with each calculation. If humanity had been concealing their true capabilities for 50 years, then everything the Council thought it knew about galactic power structures was wrong. But the energy readings suggested something even more troubling. The scale and coordination of what they were observing was beyond the capabilities of any known galactic civilization, even the ancient precursor ruins that dotted forgotten systems throughout the galaxy. Whatever humanity was doing, they were operating on a level that reduced the rest of galactic society to the status of children playing with toys. And they had chosen this moment to stop pretending otherwise. ZYX Thor's crystalline form dimmed as he contemplated the implications. In his 3 centuries of service, he had seen species rise and fall, civilizations clash and merge, and the slow evolution of galactic society toward greater cooperation and understanding. But he had never seen anything that made the entire Galactic Council feel like primitives witnessing technology from the gods. As he finally made his way to the atmospheric lock, ZYX Thor carried with him a growing certainty that whatever emerged from human space would reshape everything they thought they knew about their place in the universe. The only question was whether the rest of galactic civilization would survive the revelation of what humanity truly was. The energy readings continued to climb, painting the void between stars with patterns of power that defied comprehension. And somewhere in that blazing display of impossible capabilities, humanity remained silent, leaving the galaxy to contemplate a truth that few were prepared to accept. They had never been the dominant species in their own neighborhood. They had been allowed to think they were, and that allowance had just been revoked days after the Council emergency session. Ambassador Zayax Thor found himself in the restricted archives deep beneath the Council's primary station. The crystalline corridors here were older than most civilizations, carved from a single massive asteroid that had been converted into the galaxy's primary diplomatic center over 2 millennia ago. His clearance allowed access to historical records that few beings in the galaxy had ever seen. Files on species that had vanished before most current civilizations achieved spaceflight, analysis of precursor technology that still baffled the galaxy's greatest minds, and theoretical studies on the development patterns of advanced civilizations. What he was looking for, however, was more recent. Buried in the classified sections were the original first contact reports with humanity, analysis conducted by the Council's xenopsychology teams, and early assessments of human capabilities. As his consciousness interfaced with the data storage systems, ZYX Thor felt a familiar resonance of discovery. The first file that caught his attention was a report filed by Ambassador Kelthra of the Empathic Union, one of the first Council representatives to make contact with humans 50 years ago. The report began conventionally enough, describing humanity's crude but functional spacecraft, their apparent amazement at discovering other sapient species, and their eager desire to establish peaceful relations. But as ZYX Thor read deeper, he found notes that had been marked as inconsequential at the time, but now seemed profoundly significant. Human emotional patterns are unlike anything in our species database, Kelthra had written. While they display the full range of emotions we would expect from a carbon-based sapient species, there's an underlying structure to their psychological architecture that suggests extraordinary complexity. Their ability to simultaneously hold contradictory concepts in their consciousness without cognitive dissonance is remarkable. They appear capable of processing multiple layers of truth simultaneously. ZYX Thor's crystalline matrix hummed with interest. The Empathic Union was renowned for their ability to read and understand the psychological patterns of other species. If their initial assessment suggested such complexity in human cognition, why had it been dismissed? The answer came in a follow-up note from the reviewing committee. Assessment deemed overly speculative. Likely result of subject-species novelty bias. Recommend standard integration protocols for carbon-based sapients with above-average technological development. A chill resonated through ZYX Thor's structure. The Council's own procedures had led them to ignore evidence of human uniqueness because it didn't fit established patterns. They had seen what they expected to see and dismissed what didn't conform to their understanding. The next file contained technological assessments from the Silicon Collective, whose computational abilities made them the galaxy's premier analysts of technological development. Their report was even more interesting. Human faster-than-light technology operates on principles we do not recognize, the report stated. While the end result appears similar to standard jump drives, the underlying physics seem to involve manipulation of space-time geometries that our models suggest should be impossible with their apparent technological base. When questioned about this discrepancy, human technicians claim their drives operate on intuitive engineering principles and seem genuinely unable to provide mathematical explanations for their function. ZYX Thor processed this information with growing alarm. The Silicon Collective analysis was usually considered definitive on technological matters. If they couldn't understand human FTL technology, it meant humanity was operating on scientific principles unknown to galactic civilization. But the humans had presented their technology as crude and barely functional, constantly asking for technical advice and trade agreements for more advanced components. Either they had been systematically deceiving the galaxy's greatest technological experts, or they genuinely didn't understand their own capabilities. A third possibility occurred to ZYX Thor that was even more unsettling. What if human consciousness operated on fundamentally different principles than other known species? What if they could utilize technologies they couldn't consciously understand? The next series of files contained economic analysis from the Trade Guild, ZYX Thor's own organization. Here he found data that painted an even more remarkable picture of human expansion. Human colonies had been established in systems previously considered uninhabitable by galactic standards. Worlds with extreme temperatures, toxic atmospheres, crushing gravity, or radiation levels that would kill most known species were not only inhabited by humans, but often thriving. When questioned about their adaptation techniques, humans typically cited genetic diversity and evolutionary adaptability as if these were simple explanations rather than impossible biological capabilities. More troubling was the pattern of human resource utilization. Most galactic species exploited the easily accessible resources of the systems they colonized. Humans seemed to extract value from everything, mining trace elements that other species ignored, establishing energy collection systems around unstable stars, even harvesting materials from asteroid belts that had been written off as too dangerous to approach. Their economic efficiency was so high that some human colonies were showing profit within their first year of operation, something that typically took decades for even the most skilled galactic civilizations. It's as if they see possibilities we cannot perceive, one economic analyst had noted. They consistently find value in systems and resources we had classified as worthless. Either their analytical capabilities far exceed our estimates, or they are operating with information sources we do not understand. HFY Stories paused in his research as alarms began sounding throughout the archive complex. Emergency protocols activated, sealing the archives and flooding them with defensive fields. Whatever was happening above was serious enough to trigger the station's highest security measures. His consciousness interfaced with the station's communication systems, seeking information about the emergency. What he found sent harmonic shocks through his crystalline matrix. The energy readings from human space had intensified beyond all measurement. More concerning, similar energy signatures were now being detected in previously unknown locations throughout the galaxy. Deep space regions that had shown no signs of activity were suddenly blazing with power outputs that dwarfed anything in recorded history. A priority message reached his consciousness from Director Veltar. Report to emergency council session immediately. New developments require immediate consultation. As HFY Stories made his way through the archive's emergency corridors, his mind processed the implications of what he had learned. Humanity hadn't just been hiding their capabilities. They had been systematically presenting themselves as less advanced than they were while secretly establishing infrastructure throughout the galaxy. The emergency council chamber was in chaos when he arrived. Representatives from every major galactic civilization were present, their various atmospheric requirements creating a complex mixture of gases and energy fields. The chamber's view screens showed a galaxy-wide map with energy signatures blazing like new stars in dozens of locations. Report. Director Veltar commanded as HFY Stories took his position. Navigation Coordinator Thex's gaseous form was cycling through rapid data exchanges with the station's sensors. The energy signatures we detected in human space are now appearing throughout the galaxy. Deep space monitoring stations have identified 17 new sources of massive energy output in regions previously thought empty. The implications struck the chamber like a physical force. If humans had secretly established installations throughout the galaxy, then their actual territorial control was far beyond what anyone had imagined. How is this possible? Demanded Ambassador Korthak, his reptilian features displaying bioluminescent patterns of disbelief. Our deep space surveys would have detected any major installations, unless they were specifically designed to remain undetected. HFY Stories transmitted, his form brightening with urgent realization. I've been reviewing first contact records. Human technology operates on principles we don't understand. If they can manipulate space-time in ways our physics can't explain, they could certainly hide installations from our sensors. To what end? Ambassador Yilith's photosynthetic patterns flickered with concern. Why establish secret bases throughout the galaxy? Before anyone could respond, the chamber's central view screen flashed with an incoming transmission. The signal was coming from the direction of Earth. humanity's home system, but it was unlike any communication protocol in the Galactic database. Transmission detected, announced the chamber's AI system. Unknown protocol, but patterns suggest sapient origin. Attempting translation. The view screen flickered and resolved into an image that sent shock waves through every representative present. A human figure appeared, but not like any human they had encountered before. This individual wore clothing of clearly advanced design, stood in what appeared to be a command center of incredible sophistication, and, most importantly, showed no sign of surprise or confusion at addressing the Galactic Council. "Greetings, members of the Galactic Council," the human said, their voice carrying through universal translators with perfect clarity. "My name is Admiral Sarah Chun, and I represent the Terran Coordination Authority. We apologize for the secrecy, but circumstances have required us to reveal capabilities we had hoped to keep hidden for some time longer." Silence filled the chamber. No one had ever heard of the Terran Coordination Authority. According to all official records, humanity was governed by a loose confederation of planetary governments with no central authority. Admiral Chun continued without waiting for a response. "For 50 of your standard years, humanity has maintained a policy of careful integration with galactic society. We have studied your civilizations, learned from your cultures, and contributed to galactic commerce and diplomacy while concealing the full extent of our capabilities." Director Veltar's compound eyes shifted through the spectrum, betraying her species' equivalent of confusion and alarm. "For what purpose? Why deceive the Council?" "Because," Admiral Chin replied, her expression growing serious, "we discovered something that threatened not just humanity, but all sapient life in the galaxy. Something that required us to prepare in secret while maintaining the illusion of being a young, relatively powerless species." The chamber erupted in harmonics of alarm and confusion from dozens of different species. ZYX Thor felt his crystalline matrix resonating with frequencies of deep unease. Whatever humanity had discovered, it was significant enough to justify half a century of deception. Admiral Chun raised her hand, and the gesture somehow carried enough authority to quiet the chamber. The casual display of command presence over representatives of 47 different species was itself a demonstration of capabilities no one had suspected. 3 days ago, our early warning systems detected the approach of what we have designated as a Devour fleet. These entities represent a threat unlike anything in recorded galactic history. They consume not just planets or resources, but entire civilizations, leaving behind empty space where star systems once existed. The view screen shifted to display sensor data that made no sense to any known physics. Vast, dark shapes moved through space, but they seemed to absorb light and energy rather than reflecting it. Where they passed, stars dimmed, and space itself seemed to contract. Our projections indicate the Devour fleet will reach the outer systems of galactic civilization within 72 standard hours. Traditional defensive measures will be ineffective. The only hope for survival is coordinated resistance using technologies and strategies that require decades of secret preparation. ZYX Thor's consciousness processed the information with growing horror. The energy readings they had detected weren't weapons or industrial processes. They were defensive installations coming online throughout the galaxy. Humanity had been preparing for war against an enemy the rest of the galaxy didn't even know existed. The secret installations we have activated throughout the galaxy are part of a defensive network we hoped never to need, Admiral Chin continued. They represent technologies developed through analysis of precursor ruins that we discovered but never reported to galactic authorities. We believed, correctly, as it turns out, that revealing such advanced capabilities would destabilize galactic society before we could complete necessary preparations. The chamber was silent except for the ambient systems. Every representative was processing implications that redefined everything they thought they knew about their place in the universe. You have had 50 years to warn us. Director Veltar finally clicked, her mandibles betraying species-specific patterns of anger. Why reveal this threat only now? Admiral Chen's expression grew grim. Because until 3 days ago, we believed we had successfully diverted the Devour fleet away from galactic space. Our deep space monitoring stations detected what we thought was the final departure of their scouts from this region. We were wrong. They weren't leaving, they were calling for reinforcements. The view screen updated with new sensor data showing the approach vectors of the alien fleet. The scale was beyond comprehension. Hundreds of massive objects moving through space at velocities that should have been impossible, each one larger than most space stations. The Devour fleet's advanced scouts have been observing galactic civilization for over a century, Admiral Chun continued. They were waiting for our technology and population to reach levels that would make conquest worthwhile. Our deception bought us time to prepare, but also ensured that when they arrived, they would face more resistance than they anticipated. ZYX Thor finally understood the true scope of what humanity had been doing. They hadn't just been hiding their capabilities. They had been waging a secret war against an enemy that posed an existential threat to all galactic life. Every trade route they established, every colony they founded, every technological exchange they participated in had been part of a larger strategy to prepare the galaxy for a war no one else knew was coming. What do you require from the Council? Director Veltar asked, her voice carrying harmonics of reluctant respect. Full cooperation and immediate mobilization of all defensive assets, Admiral Chen replied without hesitation. We have prepared contingencies, but success requires coordination on a scale never before achieved in galactic history. Every species, every world, every resource will be necessary to ensure survival. The gravity of the situation settled over the chamber like a physical weight. Humanity had revealed themselves not as conquerors or competitors, but as guardians who had spent 50 years preparing to defend civilizations that didn't even know they needed defending. Time is short, Admiral Chen continued. Our defensive network will begin coordinated operations within 6 hours. We request that all Council members prepare their populations for what may be the most significant challenge in galactic history. As the transmission ended, ZYX Thor found himself reassessing everything he thought he knew about power, civilization, and survival. Humanity hadn't just been hiding among the galactic community. They had been protecting it. And now the moment had come to discover whether 50 years of secret preparation would be enough to preserve all sapient life in the galaxy. The silence that had so alarmed the Council wasn't the quiet of the defeated. It was the silence of warriors taking position for the most important battle in galactic history. The war room deep within Council Station had been converted into a command center unlike anything seen in galactic history. Representatives from 47 different species worked alongside human military advisors who had appeared as if from nowhere, their presence revealing the depth of humanity's secret integration into galactic society. Ambassador ZYX Thor found himself assigned to the Strategic Analysis Division, where his crystalline processing capabilities were being utilized to coordinate defensive positions across 17 star systems. Around him, the controlled chaos of galactic mobilization unfolded with startling efficiency. Defensive Grid 7 Alpha is reporting full activation, announced Captain Torres, one of the human officers who had materialized from humanity's hidden command structure. Her casual competence in coordinating multi-species operations suggested years of preparation for this exact scenario. ZYX Thor watched data streams flow through his consciousness as hundreds of installations throughout the galaxy came online simultaneously. The technology was beyond anything he had imagined possible. Energy shields that could protect entire star systems, weapons platforms that manipulated gravitational fields, and coordination networks that somehow transmitted information faster than light itself. "How long have you been planning this?" he transmitted to Captain Torres, genuinely curious about the scope of humanity's preparations. Torres paused in her coordination efforts, her expression thoughtful. The basic framework was established 73 years ago, shortly after we achieved FTL capability. Our deep space exploration missions discovered precursor installations that told us about the Devour fleet. We've been building our response ever since. The implications staggered ZYX Thor. Humanity had been preparing for this war longer than they had been part of galactic society. Their entire relationship with the Galactic Council had been shaped by a threat none of them had known existed. The Council sensors are detecting movement at the Galactic Rim, Navigation Coordinator Thex announced from his position at the Central Monitoring Station. His gaseous form was cycling through rapid data streams, processing information from sensors throughout the galaxy. The main display updated to show the outer regions of galactic space. What appeared there defied comprehension. A wall of darkness advancing through space, consuming light and matter as it moved. Within the darkness, massive shapes moved with purpose and intelligence that spoke of technology beyond anything in known science. Estimated time to first contact with outer defense perimeters? Director Veltar asked, her compound eyes shifting through patterns that indicated maximum alertness. 37 hours, replied Admiral Chun, who had arrived on Council Station with a small fleet of ships that had somehow remained undetected in nearby space for decades. Our outer sensor networks are already engaging their scout forces. The view screen shifted to tactical displays showing battles taking place in regions of space so distant that light from the conflicts wouldn't reach galactic civilization for years. Human defensive installations were engaging alien forces using technologies that operated outside known physics. Why can't we see these battles directly? Asked Representative Gorth of the Silicon Collective, his metallic form crackling with electromagnetic infusion as he processed sensor data that defied his species' understanding of technology. Because, Admiral Chin replied calmly, both sides are fighting with weapons and defensive systems that exist partially outside normal space-time. The battles are occurring in dimensions that our standard sensors cannot detect. ZYX Thor felt harmonic resonance of pure shock through his crystalline matrix. Humanity was casually discussing concepts that challenged the fundamental understanding of reality held by every galactic civilization. How is such technology possible? Director Veltar demanded. Admiral Chun gestured to the tactical displays where impossible energies painted patterns across the void. The precursor ruins we discovered contained not just advanced technology, but evidence of civilizations that achieved capabilities we're only beginning to understand. The Devour fleet represents entities that consumed those civilizations. To fight them, we had to learn to think beyond the limitations that traditional physics places on warfare. On the main screen, the first direct images of the enemy began to appear. The Devour fleet entities were not ships in any conventional sense. They were structures of impossible geometry that seemed to bend space around them. Some appeared to be living organisms of planetary scale, while others resembled mechanical constructs that operated on principles no known science could explain. They're not just technologically advanced, Admiral Chen continued, her voice carrying undertones of hard-won knowledge. They're functionally immortal, capable of consuming and incorporating the technologies and knowledge of entire civilizations. Every species they destroy makes them more powerful. The chamber filled with harmonics of species-specific alarm as the implications sank in. This wasn't just a war for territory or resources. It was a fight for the right of sapient life to exist in the universe. What are our chances? Ambassador Yyleth asked, her photosynthetic patterns flickering with patterns that indicated deep fear. Better than they would have been without 50 years of preparation, Admiral Chun replied honestly. The Devour fleet expects to face isolated planetary defenses and primitive space-based weapons. Instead, they will encounter coordinated resistance using technologies they haven't seen before. The tactical display updated to show the deployment of galactic defensive forces. What ZYX Thor saw there redefined his understanding of military capability. Humanity had not just prepared secret weapons, and defensive installations. They had designed an entire strategic framework that utilized the unique capabilities of every galactic species. The crystalline hegemony's ability to process vast amounts of data made them ideal for coordination roles. The gaseous collective's atmospheric manipulation capabilities were being utilized to create massive sensor networks throughout interstellar space. Even the Silicon Collective's computational abilities were being integrated into targeting systems that operated across multiple star systems simultaneously. "You've been studying us," ZYX Thor realized, his form brightening with understanding. "Every trade agreement, every cultural exchange, every piece of information shared with humanity. You are learning how to integrate our species into a military alliance." Admiral Chen nodded without shame. Every species in galactic civilization possesses unique capabilities that contribute to our collective survival. We spent 50 years learning how to coordinate those capabilities into an effective defense against an enemy that has destroyed civilizations far more advanced than any of us individually. The view screen flashed with urgent updates from the outer defensive perimeters. Human installations were reporting first contact with advanced elements of the Devourer fleet, and the initial exchanges revealed the true scale of what they faced. "Energy readings are off all scales," reported Captain Torres, her voice tight with concentration as she processed data from battles occurring at the edge of known space. "The enemy is utilizing weapons that can destabilize entire star systems. Our outer installations are responding with gravitational manipulation techniques," Admiral Chun announced to the chamber. "We're creating artificial black holes to disrupt their advanced formations while our main defensive lines prepare for engagement." ZYX Thor processed this information with growing amazement. Humanity was casually discussing the creation of black holes as a defensive measure. The technology required for such capabilities was beyond anything he had imagined possible. How many civilizations have fallen to these entities? Director Veltar asked, her mandibles clicking with species-specific anxiety patterns. Admiral Chen's expression grew grim. "Based on precursor records and our own deep space archaeology, we estimate that the Devourer fleet has consumed over 2,000 galactic-scale civilizations across this region of the universe. Some of them were millions of years more advanced than current galactic society." The number hung in the air like a death sentence. 2,000 civilizations, each representing billions or trillions of sapient beings, reduced to empty space and consumed resources. "But they made a mistake with us," Admiral Chun continued, her voice carrying undertones of fierce determination. "They assumed we would follow the same development patterns as previous civilizations. They didn't account for human adaptability or our ability to coordinate diverse species into unified resistance." The tactical display updated with new information as the first major engagement began at the Galactic Rim. What ZYX Thor saw there challenged every assumption he had held about warfare and technology. Human defensive installations were not simply shooting at the enemy. They were manipulating the fundamental structure of space-time itself. Gravity wells appeared and disappeared, creating maze-like obstacle courses that forced the Devourer fleet entities into predetermined positions. Space itself was being weaponized in ways that no galactic civilization had imagined possible. "The enemy is adapting to our initial defensive strategies," Captain Torres reported, her hands moving across control interfaces that seemed to respond to thought as much as touch. "They're learning faster than projected." "Expected," Admiral Chun replied without concern. "Phase 2 deployment authorized." The view screen exploded with new activity as installations throughout the galaxy activated capabilities that had remained hidden even from the emergency mobilization. Entire star systems suddenly blazed with energy as defensive networks revealed their true scope. "What is Phase 2? ZYX Thor asked, though part of him wasn't sure he wanted to know. "Dimensional warfare," Admiral Chun replied matter-of-factly. "The Devourer fleet operates partially outside normal space-time. To defeat them, we must be capable of following them into whatever dimensional spaces they utilize. The implications struck the chamber like a physical force. Humanity was preparing to fight battles in dimensions that existed outside the known universe. The technology required for such operations was beyond theoretical. It suggested mastery of physical laws that most galactic civilizations considered impossible to manipulate. Is such technology safe? Ambassador Korthak asked, his reptilian features displaying bioluminescent patterns of deep concern. Admiral Chen's pause was telling. No, dimensional manipulation carries risks that could potentially destabilize local spacetime. But the alternative is the complete extinction of all sapient life in the galaxy. The tactical display showed human forces beginning to phase in and out of normal space, pursuing devour fleet entities into dimensional realms that the sensors could barely detect. The battles that resulted defied visual comprehension. Conflicts where the participants existed in multiple dimensions simultaneously, fighting with weapons that could unmake reality itself. Status report from Outer Defensive Grid Alpha, Captain Torres announced. Enemy advance elements have been successfully contained, but at the cost of 3-star systems. We've had to collapse local space-time to prevent their escape. ZYX Thor's crystalline matrix resonated with shock. Humanity was sacrificing entire star systems to contain the enemy advance. The scale of the conflict was beyond anything in recorded galactic history. Were those systems inhabited? Director Veltar asked, her voice carrying harmonics of species-specific horror. Pre-evacuated, Admiral Chen replied. We began moving populations from at-risk systems 40 years ago. The residents were told it was for resource development projects. No sapient lives were lost in the containment operation. The revelation that humanity had been secretly evacuating entire star systems for decades added another layer to ZYX Thor's understanding of the scope of their preparations. They had been planning not just for war, but for the necessary sacrifices that victory would require. Enemy main force composition is becoming clear, Captain Torres reported, her voice tight with concentration as data flowed from sensors operating in multiple dimensions. We're facing approximately 3,000 capital-class entities, each roughly equivalent to a small moon in mass and technological capability. The numbers were staggering. 3,000 moon-sized entities, each representing technology advanced enough to threaten entire civilizations. Against such a force, traditional galactic defenses would have been utterly useless. The command center had evolved into something unprecedented in galactic history. A fusion of technologies from 47 different species coordinated by human tactical systems that operated on principles beyond conventional understanding. Ambassador ZYX Thor found himself interfacing directly with quantum processing networks that allowed his crystalline consciousness to participate in strategic calculations spanning multiple dimensions. Enemy main force has breached the outer defensive perimeter, Captain Torres announced, her voice steady despite the magnitude of what that meant. Around her, holographic displays showed the approach of entities so massive that individual units registered as gravitational anomalies on long-range sensors. Admiral Chun stood at the center of the command center, surrounded by data streams that would have overwhelmed any other being. Her calm competence in the face of galaxy-threatening catastrophe was itself a testament to humanity's psychological preparation for this moment. Initiate Operation Lighthouse, she commanded, and ZYX Thor felt the galaxy itself respond to her words. Throughout known space, installations that had been disguised as everything from mining stations to scientific observatories suddenly revealed their true purpose. The energy readings were so intense that space itself began to warp around the activation points. What is Operation Lighthouse? Director Veltar demanded, her compound eyes cycling through patterns of maximum alertness as the chamber's sensors registered energy spikes throughout galactic civilization. Our primary defensive strategy, Admiral Chen replied, her attention focused on tactical displays that showed battles taking place across multiple dimensions simultaneously. We're going to make our entire galaxy invisible to the Devour fleet, while simultaneously creating a pocket universe where this conflict can be resolved without endangering surrounding galactic clusters. The implications of her words struck the chamber like a physical force. Humanity was proposing to remove their entire galaxy from normal space-time to protect neighboring regions of the universe from a conflict. Is such a thing possible? Ambassador Korthak asked, his reptilian features displaying bioluminescent patterns of disbelief. We're about to find out, Admiral Chun replied with grim humor. The theoretical framework is based on precursor technology that we've spent 50 years learning to understand. The practical application has never been attempted on this scale. ZYX Thor watched through his interface connections as human installations throughout the galaxy began to coordinate in ways that defied his understanding of physics. Space itself was being manipulated, folded, and restructured to create defensive barriers that existed in multiple dimensions simultaneously. Status report from Cascade Defense Grid. Captain Torres called out, her hands moving across control interfaces that seemed to respond to neural commands. All primary nodes are online and responding. We have successfully established quantum entanglement between defense installations across 17,000 light-years. The number was staggering. Humanity had created an instantaneous communication and coordination network that spanned the entire galaxy. The technology required for such an achievement was beyond what any galactic civilization had thought possible. Enemy response to our dimensional manipulation is unexpected, Torres continued, her voice carrying undertones of concern. They're not just adapting to our tactics, they're learning from them. Some entities are beginning to manipulate space-time in ways that mirror our own techniques. Admiral Chen's expression grew grim. Expected but concerning. The Devour fleet incorporates the technologies and knowledge of every civilization they consume. They're using capabilities they learned from conquering the precursors. On the main view screen, the battle for the galaxy's survival unfolded in ways that challenged visual comprehension. Human forces were fighting battles where time moved backwards, space folded in on itself, and the distinction between matter and energy became meaningless. Against them, Devour fleet entities deployed weapons that could unmake the fundamental forces that held reality together. Civilian evacuation status? Admiral Chun asked without taking her attention from the tactical displays. 97% of galactic population has been relocated to protected dimensional pockets, Torres replied. Remaining evacuations are proceeding as scheduled, but we're approaching the practical limits of our pocket dimension generators. ZYX Thor processed this information with growing amazement. Humanity had somehow created alternate dimensional spaces large enough to house the populations of entire galactic civilizations. The scale of engineering required was beyond his ability to comprehend. How many people are we talking about? He asked through the neural interface. Approximately 2.7 trillion sapient beings, Torres replied matter-of-factly, as if relocating the population of an entire galaxy to alternate dimensions was a routine logistics operation. The casual mention of numbers that vast illustrated the scope of what humanity had prepared for. They hadn't just planned for war. They had prepared to preserve galactic civilization itself, regardless of the conflict's outcome. Enemy main force is now engaging our primary defensive installations, Torres announced. Initial contact suggests their capabilities exceed our most pessimistic projections. The tactical displays updated with data that sent shockwaves through ZYX Thor's consciousness. Individual Devour fleet entities were demonstrating the ability to consume entire star systems, converting matter and energy into some form of sustenance that enhanced their capabilities. They weren't just conquering, they were literally feeding on civilization itself. Operation Lighthouse Phase 2 Authorization, Admiral Chen commanded. Begin galactic displacement procedures. The chamber's sensors suddenly registered changes that defied every known law of physics. Throughout the galaxy, space itself began to shift, and Warp as humanity's installations initiated procedures that would remove their entire galactic cluster from normal spacetime. "This is madness," Representative Gorth transmitted, his metallic form crackling with electromagnetic interference from the massive energies being manipulated around them. "You're risking the destruction of everything we've built." "No," Admiral Chun replied with calm certainty. "We're risking everything to preserve it. The alternative is certain extinction for all sapient life in this region of the universe." Through his neural interface, ZYX Thor could feel the galaxy itself responding to human commands. Stars were being moved, space-time was being restructured, and the fundamental laws of physics were being rewritten to create a battleground that wouldn't endanger the rest of the universe. "Galactic displacement at 30% completion," Torres reported. "Enemy forces are attempting to prevent the procedure by anchoring sections of space-time to normal dimensions." The battle that followed redefined ZYX Thor's understanding of conflict. Human forces and Devour Fleet entities fought for control of reality itself, using weapons that could create or destroy universes. The stakes were no longer just the survival of galactic civilization. They were fighting for the right to determine the fundamental nature of existence in their region of space-time. "Displacement procedure encountering resistance," Torres announced, her voice tight with concentration. "Enemy entities are utilizing gravitational manipulation techniques that exceed our theoretical limits. Deploy the paradox weapons," Admiral Chen ordered, and ZYX Thor felt a chill resonate through his crystalline matrix. "Admiral," Captain Torres said, her hands hesitating over control interfaces, "the paradox weapons have never been tested at this scale. The potential for catastrophic dimensional feedback is acceptable compared to certain extinction," Admiral Chen finished. "Authorization confirmed. Deploy all paradox weapon systems." The view screen exploded with activity as installations throughout the galaxy activated weapons that operated by creating logical contradictions in the laws of physics. The results defied description. Areas of space where effect preceded cause, weapons that destroyed targets before being fired, and defensive systems that existed in multiple contradictory states simultaneously. "What are paradox weapons?" Director Veltar demanded, her compound eyes shifting through patterns that indicated species-specific terror. "Weapons that exploit the fact that reality is not as stable as most civilizations assume," Admiral Chen replied, her attention focused on tactical data that showed impossible battles taking place across multiple dimensions. "By creating logical paradoxes in the fundamental structure of space-time, we can defeat enemies that exist partially outside normal physics." The explanation was both illuminating and terrifying. Humanity had developed weapons that attacked the logical consistency of reality itself. Against an enemy that could manipulate the laws of physics, they had chosen to fight by temporarily eliminating those laws. "Status report on primary targets," Admiral Chen commanded. "Paradox weapons are achieving intended effects against enemy capital units," Torres replied, though her voice carried undertones of concern. "However, dimensional stability is beginning to deteriorate. We're approaching the critical threshold for universal causality breakdown." ZYX Thor processed this information with growing alarm. The weapons that were saving the galaxy were also threatening the logical foundations that allowed existence itself to function. "Time to critical failure," Admiral Chen asked. "Approximately 4 hours at current rate of paradox generation," Torres replied. "Recommend immediate withdrawal from paradox weapon deployment." "Negative," Admiral Chun replied firmly. "Continue deployment until enemy main force is neutralized or universal causality reaches critical failure point. We don't get a second chance at this." The magnitude of the gamble struck ZYX Thor with harmonic resonance of pure terror. Humanity was willing to risk the logical consistency of reality itself to defeat the Devour Fleet. They were fighting a war where victory and defeat were both measured in terms of universal survival. "Admiral," Torres announced, her voice carrying a tone ZYX Thor had never heard before. human excitement mixed with disbelief. Long-range sensors are detecting massive changes in enemy formation patterns. They appear to be retreating. The chamber fell silent except for the ambient hum of life support systems. The idea that the Devour fleet could be forced to retreat was beyond what anyone had thought possible. "Confirm that reading," Admiral Chun ordered, though her voice carried undertones of cautious hope. "Confirmed," Torres replied, her excitement growing. "Enemy entities are withdrawing from galactic space. Dimensional displacement readings suggest they are relocating to alternate universe frameworks." The view screen updated with sensor data that showed the impossible. Devour fleet entities were disappearing from normal space-time, apparently seeking easier targets in alternate realities where they wouldn't face humanity's paradox-based defenses. "They're leaving," Director Veltar transmitted, her compound eyes cycling through patterns of disbelief. "How is this possible?" Admiral Chin's smile was grim with hard-won knowledge. "Because they've encountered something they haven't seen before. A civilization willing to risk universal existence to preserve sapient life. They're functionally immortal, but they're not suicidal. Fighting us to extinction would cost them more than seeking conquest elsewhere." "What about the damage to space-time?" Ambassador Korthak asked, his bioluminescent patterns showing deep concern for the dimensional instabilities that the paradox weapons had created. "Reparable," Admiral Chin replied, though her tone suggested the process would be neither easy nor quick. "We've developed techniques for restoring causality to damaged regions of space-time. It will take decades, but the galaxy will recover its normal physics." As the immediate threat receded, ZYX Thor found himself processing the long-term implications of what had just occurred. Humanity had not just saved the galaxy. They had redefined what was possible in terms of civilization's response to existential threats. "What happens now?" he asked of the neural interface. Admiral Chun looked around the chamber at representatives of 47 different species who had just witnessed the most significant event in galactic history. "Now," she said quietly, "we rebuild. But this time, we build knowing that the universe contains threats that require capabilities none of US could achieve alone. The galaxy survives because diverse civilizations learn to coordinate their unique strengths into something greater than the sum of their parts." The screens around them showed a galaxy forever changed, star systems displaced to new locations, space-time regions that would require decades of repair, and a galactic community that had discovered its own potential for unprecedented cooperation. But most importantly, they showed a galaxy where sapient life continued to exist, where trillions of beings could pursue their dreams and aspirations without fear of universal extinction. Humanity had fallen silent to prepare for war. Now they spoke again to guide the galaxy toward a peace that would honor the sacrifices required to preserve it 6 months after the Devour fleet's retreat. Ambassador ZYX Thor stood in the reconstructed council chambers, watching as representatives from 47 species participated in what historians would later call the Great Integration. The galaxy they inhabited was fundamentally different from the one that had existed before humanity's revelations, and the changes went far beyond the visible scars left by dimensional warfare. The chamber itself had been redesigned using human spatial manipulation technologies, allowing it to exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously. This meant that species with incompatible atmospheric or gravitational requirements could now share the same physical space while existing in slightly different dimensional frameworks. The result was a level of integration that had never before been possible in galactic politics. The final report on dimensional stabilization efforts, Director Veltar announced, her compound eyes reflecting the soft bioluminescence of data streams that now flowed freely between species. The Hive Queen had adapted to the new reality with remarkable grace, embracing technologies that allowed direct mind-to-mind communication across species barriers. Admiral Chun, who had accepted the newly created position of Galactic Defense Coordinator, stood to address the assembly. In the months since the crisis, she had become a figure of respect and authority that transcended species boundaries. Restoration of normal space-time parameters is proceeding ahead of schedule, she reported, her voice carrying through translation systems that have been enhanced with human consciousness bridging technologies. 73% of affected regions have been returned to standard physics. The remaining areas will require specialized attention due to the exotic nature of the paradox damage, but we expect full restoration within 18 standard months. HFY Thor processed this information through neural interfaces that have been upgraded with human quantum processing capabilities. His own role had evolved far beyond trade coordination. He now served as a cultural integration specialist, helping species adapt to the new reality of true galactic cooperation. More importantly, Admiral Chun continued, the defensive network remains fully operational. We have established monitoring stations in 17 alternate dimensional frameworks to provide early warning of any future threats similar to the Devour fleet. The implications of her words resonated through the Chamber's collective consciousness. Humanity had not just defeated an impossible enemy. They had created a detection system that could monitor threats across multiple universes. The scale of their capabilities continued to exceed what most species could comprehend. What are the populations relocated to emergency dimensional shelters? Asked Ambassador Yyleth, her photosynthetic patterns now enhanced with human biotechnology that allowed her to process quantum information directly through her cellular structure. All civilian populations have been successfully returned to normal space, Admiral Chin replied. The experience of dimensional displacement has had some unexpected positive effects. Many individuals report enhanced spatial awareness and improved ability to process complex multidimensional concepts. HFY Thor had experienced these changes himself. The months spent coordinating across dimensional barriers had fundamentally altered his consciousness, expanding his ability to perceive and interact with reality in ways that his species had never imagined possible. The economic impact assessments are complete, he transmitted to the assembly. Integration of human spatial manipulation technologies has increased galactic trade efficiency by over 300%. Resource extraction capabilities have expanded by similar margins due to access to previously untappable dimensional reserves. The numbers were staggering, but they represented only the beginning of what true galactic cooperation could achieve. Humanity's technologies were not just advanced. They were specifically designed to enhance the capabilities of other species rather than replace them. Cultural integration reports requested Director Veltar, her mandibles clicking with what HFY Thor now recognized as anticipation rather than anxiety. The months of crisis had taught them all to embrace change rather than fear it. Representative Gorth of the Silicon Collective responded, his metallic form now enhanced with human consciousness bridging technologies that allowed direct interface with organic neural networks. Cross-species collaboration has reached unprecedented levels. Our collective processing capabilities now exceed the sum of individual species' abilities by factors we are still calculating. The most significant change, Admiral Chen added, is psychological. Fear of the unknown has been replaced by curiosity about possibilities. The crisis taught us all that survival depends on adaptation and cooperation rather than isolation and competition. HFY Thor reflected on the truth of her words. Before the revelation of the Devour fleet threat, galactic civilization had been characterized by cautious cooperation between species that maintained careful boundaries around their unique capabilities. Now, those boundaries had dissolved into something far more powerful. True integration that enhanced everyone involved. What of humanity's role going forward? Asked Ambassador Korthak, his reptilian features now displaying enhanced bioluminescent patterns that incorporated human neural optical interfaces. Will you continue to serve as galactic guardians? Admiral Chen's expression grew thoughtful. Guardianship implies a hierarchy that no longer exists. What we've created is something unprecedented. A truly integrated galactic civilization where each species' unique capabilities contribute to collective security and prosperity. She gestured to the chamber's displays, which showed real-time data from monitoring stations throughout the galaxy and in dozens of alternate dimensions. Every species now participates in galactic defense. The crystalline hegemony's processing capabilities manage our early warning networks. The gaseous collective's atmospheric manipulation creates sensor webs that span entire galactic arms. The Silicon Collective's computational power drives our tactical analysis systems. And humanity? Director Veltar prompted. Humanity provides coordination and integration, Admiral Chen replied simply. Our role is to ensure that diverse capabilities work together effectively rather than competing against each other. The humility of her response masked the magnitude of what humans had achieved. They had revealed capabilities that exceeded those of any other known civilization, yet they had chosen to use those capabilities to elevate others rather than dominate them. There is another matter, Admiral Chun continued, her expression growing more serious. Our monitoring networks have detected evidence of other galaxy clusters facing similar threats. The Devour Fleet entities that retreated from our space have not disappeared. They have simply relocated to regions where resistance is less organized. The implications sent harmonic resonances of concern through ZYX Thor's crystalline matrix. The victory they had achieved was local rather than universal. Somewhere in the vast darkness between galaxies, other civilizations were facing the same existential threat without the advantages that galactic cooperation had provided. What do you propose? Director Veltar asked, though her compound eyes suggested she already suspected the answer. Expansion, Admiral Chun replied without hesitation. We extend our defensive networks and integration technologies to other galaxy clusters. We share what we've learned about cooperation and mutual enhancement with civilizations that may be facing similar threats. The magnitude of what she proposed struck the chamber like a physical force. Humanity was suggesting that their small galaxy cluster become the foundation for a universe-spanning alliance of sapient species. The risks are enormous, Ambassador Korthak pointed out, his bioluminescent patterns displaying concern. Each galaxy cluster may contain species and threats we cannot predict. True, Admiral Chin acknowledged. But the alternative is to wait for the threats to reach us again. The Devour Fleet entities we defeated were scouts for something larger. Our intelligence suggests that the real threat comes from entities that exist primarily outside normal space-time, using our universe as a feeding ground for capabilities we're only beginning to understand. ZYX Thor processed this information with growing realization. The battle they had fought was not the war. It was the opening engagement in a conflict that spanned multiple universes and involved entities that treated entire galaxies as resources to be consumed. How do we begin such an expansion? He asked through the neural interface. Carefully, Admiral Chun replied with a slight smile. We start by establishing communication with neighboring galaxy clusters using our dimensional communication technologies. We offer assistance and knowledge sharing without demanding immediate integration. We let other civilizations choose their own level of participation. The approach was quintessentially human, offering capabilities without imposing dominance, providing support while respecting autonomy. It represented a model of intergalactic relations that had never been attempted before. Timeline for initial contact protocols? Director Veltar asked. First probe missions will launch within 30 days, Admiral Chin replied. However, I want to emphasize that these are diplomatic and scientific missions, not military expeditions. We approach other galaxy clusters as potential partners, not territories to be secured. Over the following hours, the Council worked through the practical details of what would become the largest expansion of civilization in known history. Resources were allocated, technologies were shared, and responsibilities were distributed among species according to their unique capabilities and interests. As the session concluded, ZYX Thor found himself reflecting on the transformation that had occurred not just in galactic civilization, but in his own understanding of what was possible when different forms of consciousness worked together toward common goals. "Admiral," he transmitted as the chamber began to empty. "May I ask a personal question?" Admiral Chun paused in her review of expansion protocols. "Of course. How long have humans known about the broader scope of these threats? The entities beyond our galaxy cluster, the universe-spanning conflicts?" Her expression grew thoughtful. "We've suspected for over a century. The precursor ruins contained evidence of conflicts that spanned multiple universes, fought by entities that exist on scales we're still learning to comprehend. What we didn't know was whether sapient life could develop the capabilities necessary to survive such conflicts. And now, Admiral Chen's smile carried undertones of hard-won optimism. Now we know that consciousness itself may be the universe's answer to entities that treat reality as a resource to be consumed. When different forms of awareness work together, they can achieve capabilities that transcend what any individual species could develop. She gestured to the chamber's displays, which showed the integrated networks that now connected civilizations across their galaxy cluster. "What we've built here isn't just a defensive alliance. It's proof that consciousness can actively participate in shaping the fundamental nature of reality." As ZYX Thor made his way through the station's corridors, he reflected on the magnitude of what lay ahead. They had transformed from isolated species competing for resources into an integrated civilization capable of defending entire galaxy clusters against threats that existed beyond normal space-time. But, perhaps more importantly, they had discovered that the universe's greatest resource was not energy or matter or even technology. It was the infinite creativity that emerged when different forms of consciousness chose cooperation over competition. The moment humanity fell silent, the galaxy had felt true fear. When they spoke again, they offered something the universe had been waiting for since the first sapient thought emerged from primordial chaos, a way for consciousness itself to become an active participant in shaping the destiny of existence. The great work was just beginning. Through the viewports of Council Station, stars that had been displaced by dimensional warfare were finding new positions in space-time, creating constellation patterns that no previous civilization had ever seen. Each point of light represented not just a stellar system, but a community of species working together to ensure that sapient life would continue to flourish among the infinite possibilities of an ever-expanding universe. Humanity's silence had ended with a promise that echoed across dimensions. Never again would consciousness face the dark alone.